Hi and welcome to this video in the Getting the Most Out of Resolve series. And in this video, we're going to be having an end-to-end overview of what Resolve is all about, focusing on the base version of Resolve. So we're going to look at why you should use Resolve, how to use Resolve, and an introduction to its capabilities. But although I'm going to start with a few slides, be assured that the bulk of this video is actually a practical insight into using the software itself. So let's get started. And the first thing then we're going to talk about is why you should use Resolve. So there's good reasons for using Resolve. The first really and the most practical reason that most people use Resolve is that it enables you to share a project with your colleagues or your clients, and the base version is completely free. So it's a really easy tool to use so that you can produce more tables and reports from survey data. It means you can distribute the projects for secondary analysis so that people who want to access data can produce tables, charts, and other reports that may be of interest to them. And it enables you also to find insights in your data. So whereas perhaps part of a team might be producing all the basic analysis from a project, it might be in someone else's interest to explore particular aspects of the data in a bit more detail and find those valuable insights. And of course, one of the key things about Resolve is that it's easy to use and you'll be able to get started in minutes, and that'll come through when we look at the software in just a moment. And you can upgrade Resolve Base to a premium version. It's a low cost product, so even with a premium version, doesn't cost an awful lot more to use. And that enables you to use what are called add-ins within the software. So let's first of all look at how you get your data into Resolve. Well, if it's been processed in MRDCL or QPSMR, it really is nothing more than a button press to make the data available in Resolve so that it can be used for secondary analysis and charting. If it's not been processed in MRDCL or QPSMR, it's very inexpensive to convert it by bringing it into from SPSS or SSS formats, two formats that are widely used throughout the world to change data or interchange data from one format or one product to another. And we can provide that as an inexpensive service. Now, before we get into the base version of Resolve, which this video focuses on, a quick word about what the premium version offers. Now, the premium version allows you to use add-ins, and these may be add-ins that you can download from our website. There's just over 20 of them available now. And what are these add-ins? Well, these add-ins let you do things through custom menus that are effectively shortcuts to things that are either laborious to do or just very difficult or complex in some way. So for example, if you wanted a complex summary table, there's an add-in that lets you do that so that you can summarize data side by side from perhaps a series of rating scales. Or you may want a mean score summary table from rating scales that's ranked, for example. So all these sorts of things are available through add-ins, and they can be customized to meet your exact needs. And we can provide that as a service, or anyone with an MRDCL license can build them themselves and supply them. If they're supplying a database to a customer, for example, can supply those add-ins for you to do pretty much anything you want to do when it comes to analysis. And again, we can produce those for you, or we can edit ones that already exist at a very low fee, often as low as $50 as a one-off fee. And from these add-ins, you can get things like profiles of key data so that you get spreadsheets out, for example, showing profiles of particular questions and particular perhaps customer types. So they really are an effective way of doing complex or repetitive analysis that would otherwise be difficult to specify or perhaps too difficult for any other system. So whereas any other system that may have limitations on what it can let you do, Resolve Premium will let you do anything with these add-ins. And these add-ins let you do things with variables and tables and with charts. So we refer to them as sort of power users that are using these add-ins. And the next thing that's coming to Resolve Premium, this is really for 2022, is that you'll be allowed to automate charts and tables in Excel and PowerPoint from running things in Resolve. So that's something to come in the near future. Anyway, it's time now to take a look at Resolve itself. So let's get into the software itself, and I'm now going to open up a Resolve project. So I've opened up Resolve, and here we are with just an empty screen because I haven't actually opened a project yet. So the first place you would start is in the File menu, and if it's the first time you've been in Resolve, you'll be opening a new project. So you can make multiple projects even from one project if you want to, so you could have different sub projects if you like, but we're going to start with a new project here because we've done nothing on this project so far, and it'll prompt you for a name for the database you want to call it. So I'm going to My Analysis and save that name, and to open up a Resolve file, you'll be looking for a QRFX file, which you should have been supplied with so that you can open up the project. And I would always recommend that you open up your database in Resolve in the same folder as you have the project files for this particular server that you're going to work on. So let's double click on that. And you can see now that it loads up a list of variables for me. And they're all fairly self-explanatory. These have been done as gender, age, something here called vAge, and then all the others are by question type. And then there's some standard banners that have been supplied as well. Now, when we're supplying a Resolve files for Resolve, you can set all sorts of defaults so that when the database is used, automatically those defaults are in place, such things like the number of decimal places you might get for percentages, for example, and things like that. So there's a whole set of options that can be set so that a database is ready prepared. So let's get straight in and see what we can do with Resolve. Let's look at the basic uses of Resolve first, and then we'll go back and look at some of the detail. So the first thing I'm going to do is to click on the reports and say I want to create a report, because this is where people using Resolve will typically spend most of their time. And you can see up pops a form, and you can see here we've got default into quick reports. We'll look at rapid results and top line counts in a minute, but most users spend most of their time in quick reports. Now let's say we want to produce a table, something very simple, of question 1 analyzed by age. We can just drag age over here into the top or into the columns, and we can drag question 1 here into the side, and we're now ready to run that. If I click Run Tables, it'll say to me I haven't actually created a table set first for the tables I've made, so I can just click Yes, create a set for me, and you can see it's done that. The alternative here is to add a table set and then start adding tables to that set. That's the other way of working. So now I can run. It asks me whether I want to save these definitions so that I've got a permanent record of them, so that I could, for example, open them up again tomorrow and add some more tables or make some changes. If I'm just doing a quick query effectively on this database, I might say no. So I'm going to say no here, and it's completed the process, and I can choose to either view the files as a text file, perhaps if I want to get some quick figures or a quick view, or I can go on and open them in Excel. I'm going to say yes to this, and you can see here what I've got is a quick analysis of question 1, whether I own a bicycle, whether the respondents own a bicycle, analysed by the 3 age groups. And you can see this has all been set up with a total row, with the figures for each row coming out, and the percentage, vertically percentage on the rows here. So this tells me that 65% of people said yes who were 16 to 34, whereas 68% said yes if they were 35 to 54. So this is how the defaults have been set up to show the percentages this way, to no decimal places in this particular case, but that could be done differently if that's what's required. Or you could actually amend it for individual tables, which again we'll come back to a bit later. So that's done that table for me. I can click no on that. If I want to look at that in a CSV file, I can open it in Excel, and I can see the same figures here, but just in a spreadsheet format. So it's another way of looking at those tables. So let's now add Q3 to this table set. So I click on the table set here, drag Q3 over. I've now got Q1 and Q3 in here, as you can see, which means I can run those tables. I don't want to save them for later. I can process them. And you can see now I've not only got question 1, I've got question 3 here as well. And I have 2 tables in my volume of tables, if you like, now. And I don't want to see the CSV file this time. And I can add another table set here if I want to. So I could, in this table set, I could say I want to see question 3 here, but I want gender across the top. And I could have 2 things across the top here, gender and Q1, for example. And I could run that now. And now you can see I've got my original tables, Q1 by age, Q3 by age, and then it goes on to Q3 by gender and Q3 by question 1. So I'm building up, if you like, a volume of tables now in, if you like, in 2 sets. And of course I can delete these sets and I can actually hide them if I want to, so I don't run all my tables. And of course it's worth being careful here. If I drag lots of questions into the rows here and lots of different variables or questions into the columns, it will produce a lot of tables. So bear that in mind if you start putting multiple variables or questions into the rows and columns. Now let's have a look at what else we can do. Let's now look at things in a little bit more depth and just go back perhaps through the process a little bit more. So I'm going to close this and I'm now going to go back, if you like, to where we started, which was with the list of variables at the very beginning. And there's some tools in here which I think you'll find quite useful. Now, one of the features that I quite like is the ability you have in Resolve to group variables together. So if you've got a lot of variables in your project, this is particularly advantageous. So for example, we do have projects in Resolve that perhaps have 2,000 variables in them, which makes it a very long list to scroll through and navigate. So you can put them into groups, perhaps matching sections of a questionnaire or types of questions that you want to put together or that go together logically. So let's just have a look at how we do that. I can click on, for example, let's pick the first 6 questions here and make them into a group. So I can organize the variables into a group, call it, for example, Q1 to 6. It might be section 1 in your survey. Click OK. And now if we view by group, you can see that I get question 1 to 6 here as a discrete group down the bottom. And obviously I could organize other questions into different blocks or groups so that it makes it much easier to find what you want. Now, another feature that's particularly useful, I find, is that you can also nominate favorites that you have, so that when you come to specify analyses that you want, it's very quick to find the ones that you want, particularly perhaps where you're using a question repeatedly or a group of questions repeatedly. So how do we do that? So we can just pick on again some questions. I'm picking on 3 questions here. I can go into organize variables, add them to my favorites. It confirms that I do. You can see over here it says that it's now a favorite. Now what that means is when I come to do my reports, I can go into the report window and let's say I want to analyze question 4 here as the rows, but I want just the favorites for my columns. I can click on that checkbox there, click on columns, and you can see I'm just given a menu of the favorites that I want. And if I want that by question 1, there we go, I've done it, and I could now obviously run that analysis and continue. So that's another tool that's, I think, quite useful to help you work with your projects. And you can even right click on any of these variables or blocks of variables, and you can hide them and unhide them and duplicate them, and so that you've got the original left as it is, but duplicate it so perhaps that you can edit it and add some categories. So there's more things that you can do, but all these tools just make it a little bit easier for you to work within the Resolve platform. So now I'm going to move on to looking at putting filters on tables, because this is the sort of thing that people typically want to do when they're using Resolve. They want to dig further into their data and explore it a little bit more. So I've cleared out my old tables just a second ago, and now I'm going to start looking a bit further into what I can do with filters. So let's take question 3 as perhaps the row I want of my table, and let's go back to age here so that I've got that information of question 3 by age. But let's say I only want to see females in my table here because I want to perhaps dig into a subset of my data. Let's define a filter that I want on this table. So here we go. I've got no filters available. I'm going to call this one females. And the definition here, I'm going to insert it. You can type in syntax here, but let's do it through the menus the easy way. I'm picking people who are gender. I just want one response. I want the females. If I wanted more than one response, you can see I can click a range of answers, or I can choose different selections. So let's click that, gender 2. Okay. And now I've applied a filter of gender 2 to my table of question 3 analysed by age. Let's run that. Put it into a table set and not save the tables and view, and you can see now my table is just based on 352 females. I think there were 831 respondents originally, so now I've got a table within the 3 age groups, but only the 352 females are appearing in this table, which is a really nice way of working. So now I've cleared the filter I had just now, but what I'm going to do this time is use gender as a variable filter. And I can do that by dragging it across before. As with all these things here, I can just click on the variable filter and select it this way. It has the same effect. And now if I run, create a table set, not going to save it. And you can see now I get not only a table of females, but I get a male table first of all with 479 people in it, and then that's repeated for the females with 352 in it. So what I can also do then is use a variable filter, which will give me a separate table for each of the items in the variable. So if I clicked the age variable over here as a variable filter, what that would do would give me 3 tables, because I think there's 3 age groups here, and I'd get 1 table for each of those age groups. So that's a really good way of doing what some people call 3-dimensional tables in a very quick way. And of course I could build an additional filter on top of this that filtered the whole thing. So that's using filters in a really productive way, and filters can be more complex. So we looked just now at doing a simple filter of gender for female, just female, but let's say we want something a bit more complicated than that. We can do that too. So I'm going to call this my filter, and the definition this time I'm going to say is gender 2. So I'm going to pick females again, but in addition this time I'm going to have another condition. I'm going to pick people at question 4 that picked a range of answers. Let's say they picked cycle on and fast wheels or tracker, any of those 3. Click OK. So now I've got a more complex definition. I might want to label that as females choosing main brands, and I can run that now, create my table set and run it. And this time I'm going to save the tables. So there they are, they're being saved. We haven't saved them previously, and we look at the output, and here we go. We now got 232 females who chose one of those 3 main brands. So now I'm starting to build quite complex subsets of my data. On this particular case, it was females who chose one of 3 particular brands. And again, I can have those tables in a CSV format. So at this point, let's look at some of the other things that we can do. Now, just for simplification, and I haven't shown you this, you can use the rapid results option here. We've been working in quick reports, which is where most people seem to work within Resolve. Rapid results just takes out some of the options here that you've got on your work form here, and top line counts just gives you just a simple count of the responses for each question. So that's quite a good starting point sometimes when you get a new Resolve database, that you just select all the variables, drop them into here, run those tables, and you've got a top line count of every single question in the survey, just so you've perhaps got something you've got as a reference guide or a lookup guide to help you get started. So really just rapid results and top line counts are subsets of the full system, if you like, for perhaps doing some quick counts or having less options available. All right, so we've looked at complex filters. Let's look at one or two other things around the screen here. You can see if you want to put your own title in, you can just check this button here and put in your own title. Likewise, you can check this button and put in your own footnote there, so that appears. Perhaps you want to share an output with a colleague, you might want to put a note on it or something like that. So that's the way that you can add your own footnotes or your own titles to particular tables. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time now going around some of the other options on the screen here. Now let's just drag another question over. Let's get question 3 back in here. Now some other things you can do here. You'll see there's 2 types of format options. Now I talked a bit about format options, but there's about 200 options that control what a Resolve table looks like, and they are statistical options such as significance test, whether you have decimal places for your percentages, and a whole host of other options that are available, many of which are quite detailed and are perhaps in some cases rarely used. Now when the Resolve database is supplied, they can all be set to any default settings, so that when you open up the project in Resolve, they automatically appear, let's say with 1 decimal place for percentages. But then you can override that by clicking on Format Options overall, and you could, for example, choose that you want percentages. Let's click that particular one, and you could say, well, I want 1 decimal place for every single table when I run my tables. And you can also set local options for individual tables. So this is overall, so this is going to override what was ever supplied on the Resolve database, but then set it to 1 decimal place for all percentages, and that will override it again for an individual table. So if we run this now, we should get 1 decimal place, and we get now 1 decimal place for all of our percentages. So that's quite a quick, easy thing to do when we do that. Now we've got a couple of other options here as well. When you make these format options overall, you can save them so that you can load them back for other runs of tables that you or your colleagues might have on projects you're working on. So if you sometimes people set up perhaps 10 different options here, and they can then save them and then just load them back in as one group later on. So there's a nice easy mechanism for doing that. You can just go to Format Options and save that to your list so that you've got that for regular use in future. Now we've got a couple of options here to do with weighting. Now these are quite different, quantity weighting and respondent weighting. To use respondent weighting, you will need to know the name of the variable that's been supplied within the Resolve database that has the weighting factors for each respondent. So that's only if weighting factors have been supplied with the survey data. Now if you want to calculate your own weights for each respondent, the only way to do that would be to use the premium version, which has an add-in that lets you set up your own weighting system so that respondents are weighted to whatever targets that you want to, using either target weighting or rim weighting. Quantity weighting is quite different. That means you're going to weight the figures in the table by a value. So if we click on this button, you can see I've just got 3 different integers in here that I can use. So if I click on question 5, that's the length of their last trip. So I'm going to get a table now which is question 3, analysed by age, but weighted by the distance that they travelled for their last trip. And you can see now my table no longer is in terms of respondents, in terms of I think it's kilometers kilometers cycled. So now we've got 4,187 kilometers that were cycled by our respondents, and they're split by gender and age. Now that particular table perhaps is more commonly used when it comes to perhaps volumes of products bought and that sort of thing, where you want to know how many cans of a soft drink perhaps your sample has consumed or bought in the last month or something like that. So that's what we can do when we come to looking at tables with quantity weights, or sometimes called volumetrics. So now we're going to work on building some variables of our own from the variables that already exist. So I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this myvar, and the text for it I'm going to call question 2 summary. And I'm going to start to, and I could filter this, as you can see, with a filter button like I filtered the table just now, but let's click on responses. And I can either start to insert a response in a very similar way to the way I specified a filter earlier, or I can just block insert a whole question. And I'm going to pick question 2. And you can do various other combinations of things here. So you could pick 2 variables and have or, if you wanted people who have mentioned first or second, for example, on a recall question. But let's just pick Q2 on its own. And there it is. It's loaded in question 2 just as it stands. And now what I could do, I could insert a separate response. So I could insert a response here. And I could pick people who mentioned any of the brands. So let's pick a range of answers. Click OK. And edit the text here. So it says any of 4 main brands. Click OK, and there it is, any of 4 main brands. And I could do something more complex now. I could add to here, and I could say something like, and you can use syntax here if you know the syntax, but let's do it all through menus. I could go to question 2, pick people who said fast wheels, click OK, and add another condition. I can add as many conditions as I like. Go to question 2 again. Pick people who didn't mention tracker. So I'm now picking people who did mention fast wheels and not tracker. So that's okay. And there's some extra sort of rows on my table there, on my variable there. So I can save that. That's it saved. And there it is, added to the bottom of the list. And I might want to specify my own banner with different things across the top of my table. So let's have a variable that does something that's just for me. So I'm going to call this my banner. Call it my banner. And I'm going to do some block insert in here just for speed. So I block insert. Let's pick gender. Let's block insert age, and let's block insert question 3. There we go. So we've got some very quick analysis breaks here. You're allowed literally thousands of different columns you have on your table. I'm just showing you 11 here. But having done that, we can save that, and we're now ready to analyze my var bar my banner. So we go into quick reports again, go into the report section. So this time let's add a table set, highlight this table set, and drag these 2 variables over, my var and my banner. So they've gone straight into the table set. Run those tables. I don't want to save them. View the tables, and you can now see we've got these extra rows here. We've got the 5 brands. Any of the 4 main brands is 98%, which makes sense when none of these is 2. But you can see we got 337 people, 41% of people who mentioned fast wheels that didn't mention tracker. And we've got this analysed by gender, age, and the frequency of cycling. And we can put headers in here to make this a bit better annotated if we wanted to as well. So we've really made this quite a nice looking table that's available. And again, of course, that's available in a CSV file as well if you prefer that as your output. And again, you could apply filters to this and all the other things that I showed you, quantity weights, anything you like, any options that you might want. So really some quite powerful things. So finally, let's come to looking at producing a chart or charts in Resolve. So to do that, you need to check on this box here. and choose the type of chart that you want. So we could have a clustered column, stack bar, all sorts of different types here. I'm going to stick with the default on this particular occasion. You'll see there's a whole load of chart settings you can have here to do with whether you have a chart title, the font size, the font you use, and so on, and the colors that you use on the chart. So I'm not going to go through those right now. So I've got a table already set up here, as you can see. It's just question 2 by age. So I'm ready to run this. Let's click run, and I can look at the tables if I want to that's produced in a text file, or I can just say no and look at it as tables and charts in Excel. And we open it up, and I can just click on this link here, and you can see I've got a chart now with the brands split by the 3 age groups in my particular survey. So very quick to deal with this. This is not a picture at all. You can just edit this just like any other Excel chart, which you can obviously put into PowerPoint. So you can change how this looks and the look and feel of it, the colors, the ranges of the axes, and so on. So very easy to use that chart. And if you produce multiple tables, you'll get multiple charts here, which are all controlled by hyperlinks in an index down here. So if we had 20 tables, we'll have 20 rows in here with 20 links that you could use to navigate and find the charts that you had produced. So that brings us to the end of this end-to-end demonstration of Resolve. And just really to summarize some of the points that were made about why people use Resolve, well, it's a way of sharing projects with your clients and colleagues for free. So sharing really makes this easy so that you can distribute the project to as many people as you want to. It's free with the base version, and it's certainly a low cost if you want to use the premium version. And it means that your users of the data or of the database that you share can produce tables, charts and reports very, very quickly and easily. And it allows them to dig deep into that data to find insights that perhaps wouldn't necessarily be found. You can build your own subsets within the data and explore that subset in as much depth as you want to before you move on to another subset, for example, and explore that. And importantly, it's very easy to get started. Having watched this video, you should be in a position to be able to work on a project straight away and get some meaningful and useful research. Well, thanks for joining me. I hope this video has been useful to you. And there's other videos in our series that go into some of these aspects of Resolve in a bit more detail. And there's a separate video that covers the topic of add-ins in much more depth, when and how they really help you. Well, thanks for joining me. Goodbye.